आत्मना सच्चिद् अंश च बुद्धेः वृत्ति इति द्वयम् संयोज्य च अविवेकेन जानामि इति प्रवर्तते. The existence consciousness aspect of the self and the thought wave of the intellect, by the indiscriminate blending of these two, there arises the notion of I know. Here, Shankara turns again to pure reasoning to present his point, without resorting to an analogy or a simile. The verse aims to help us explain at the level of the mind to our own intellect how the self has come to get identified with the mind. From the standpoint of creation of duality, this explanation gets to the very root of the entire problem of ignorance and all its impact. We cannot explain this to our mind because the mind is not where reasoning, analysis, and decisions are taken. Reasoning belongs to the realm of intellect. This verse explains at the intellectual level how this false identification takes place. It is a quite fundamental misperception, and any light thrown on this will be of value to disidentify ourselves from the mind, using the intellect as our tool. Though Shankara does not give any simile for this verse, a classic example is given in Dridrishya Viveka for explaining today's verse, where in a verse two things are explained. First, there is a fire which is red hot but has no solid form. Secondly, we have an iron ball which has form but no heat. When the two are brought together, the iron ball begins to glow with the heat from the fire. Similarly, self in itself is formless. Intellect has a nature, though not a form. Intellect somehow mysteriously absorbs pure self, just like the iron ball comes into contact with fire, and having absorbed the heatness of fire, shines like a fireball. That is, the intellect, having absorbed the consciousness, in intellect, the first reflected consciousness emerges. Then, going to the next level from there on, the reflected consciousness and the ego of a human being come into contact with each other. Till this point of contact, the ego was or is pure aham only. Imagine once the iron ball, having assumed the entire quality of the red hot furnace, starts thinking, the iron ball starts thinking that it is verily the furnace itself. Exactly after the coming together of ego and the reflected consciousness, the ego gets a mistaken notion that it is verily the reflected consciousness. This is how the pure aham, with this illusion caused, becomes ahamkara, the lower ego. The blending of Atman and the intellect, which is an effect of ignorance, can never be real, as no real union is possible between two contradictory things, such as light and darkness, sentient and insentient. And such a union has to be just apparent and superimposition only. Hence, it is due to indiscrimination, or when the reality of the self is not known due to ignorance alone, that the sentient attributes of the self are superimposed on the insentient, such as the intellect and the thoughts which are only due to intellect, are attributed on the attributeless self. Chinmaya used to call the association of the intellect and the self by the term unholy wedlock. This is what the verse is referring to as indiscriminate blending of the two. The verse tells us that such an association has brought about a misplacing of identity, or a shift in our own identity from the self to a pseudo-self identified with thoughts. The latter is what we commonly call the ego self, or the ego sense, or just the ego. The unholy wedlock of the intellect and the self is similar to that of the fire and the ball, iron ball. Self has absolute reality. Intellect has only a vyavaharik reality. When the two merge, they become a compact one. They share each other's qualities. The Sat and the Chit aspects of the self are I am and I know. The intellect is the instrument of analyzing our thoughts. So, the wedlock between I am and our thoughts results in what? It results in our thinking that I am this thought. From this, a whole train of thought identification ensures. Due to ignorance and an undeveloped sense of discrimination in the intellect, this resulting thought train is mistaken to be our own self, which is in fact our pseudo-self, the ego. This indiscriminate blending referred in this verse, in philosophical term, this is known as anyonya adhyasa. So what happens In this indiscriminate blending or unholy wedlock, the ahankara begins to think and assert, I know. And with this blending, the unholiness results in the I know becoming impure as against the pure aham or pure I know. This I know has become impure, and then the sequence follows. I know I am this body. I know I am this mind. I know I am this intellect. I know these human beings, these objects satisfy me in some way or the other, and hence I like them. I know these human beings, these objects do not suit my nature, and hence I do not like them. I know that the way I lead my life is perfect. I know that even if the world may say it is imperfect, still there is justification for any mistakes or any imperfections in my life. This I know then starts developing endless notions, endless likes, endless dislikes, and some fear. The verse tells us that such an association has brought about a misplacing of identity or a shift in our identity from the self to a pseudo self identified with the thoughts repeated for more clarity. This pseudo self identification is further explained with another analogy. Suppose a woman is wearing a gold necklace and it is very much there on her neck, but somehow she misses it out and thinks that she has lost her necklace, and then she takes another artificial necklace and starts wearing it, and later falls in love with this artificial necklace so much so that she loses cognizance of the worth of the real gold necklace, and ignorantly she starts admiring herself with that artificial necklace thereafter, and starts finding fulfillment in this artificial necklace. So she has entered into an unholy wedlock between herself and the artificial necklace, Whereas where the artificial necklace has superimposed itself upon the real necklace. Not that the real necklace is gone or vanished or non-existent. It is very much there. It is superimposed by the artificial jewelry. And the woman starts thinking, a woman starts having fulfillment in that artificial jewelry. That is how the reflected consciousness, which as clearly elaborated in the Dridrishya Viveka sessions, which the consciousness has been absorbed by the intellect mirror without any will of absolute consciousness, because consciousness cannot will. For willing, one has to have a thought or the mind. So, with the reflection on the mirror, it becomes a reflected consciousness. And the reflection is further passed on to our mind, our senses. And of course, our prana, our body, everything. So, here, since the reflection has happened to our mind, let us keep this body aspect for a while away from this discussion. Since the reflection has happened on or to our mind, the mind is lit up. And the lit up mind, instead of realizing that it is lit up due to the borrowed consciousness, if that consciousness had not illumined the mind would have remained insentient forever. The mind, just because it is lit up, forgets or fails to retrace the illumination to its very source and starts thinking, behaving as if the lit up mind, along with the lit up senses and the body and intellect, it is complete in itself. So there are schools of thoughts where one school says the body is everything, and another school says mind is everything, another school says intellect is everything. Okay, these are all the effect of the unholy wedlock between aham, ego, and the reflected consciousness, where the ego becomes impure. And there is total disaster in life thereafter. This is what this verse explains to us. Without explaining the solution to this disaster, But we as students of Vedanta know that, or even logically also we know that for solving any problem permanently, one has to go to the root cause of the problem and eliminate the problem. Here, the root cause of the problem is the unholy wedlock of ego, aham, and the reflected consciousness, resulting in the ego becoming impure and spreading the impurity to the mind, senses, body, etc. Since this is the root cause, the solution is to render the mind pure. The way to render the mind pure is engaging the mind in spiritual sadhana and move towards analyzing, getting convinced, and then move towards reaching the very source of the reflection that has happened in the mirror intellect, and ultimately the reflected consciousness itself getting merged into the pure consciousness. Hari Om Tat Sat.